Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast, the United show brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. Que sera, whatever will be. Steven Railston made it home in time for tea. I'm your host, Rich Fay, and on today's podcast, we'll wish our colleague all the best for booking today off work prematurely, look back at United's Wembley win at the weekend, and have our say on how far Ten Hag can take his side. Now, it was a day in which United's expertise and doggedness got them over the line, so who better to join us on the podcast than our own two experienced United writers, Samuel Luckhurst and Tyrone Marshall. Start with you, Samuel. How are you doing? How was Wembley?
I'm very well, thank you. That reminds me, Stephen taking the day off, the time about half the desk took the day off the day after the Euro 2020 final in anticipation of England winning it, and then of course they didn't. So some things never change there. But I think you and I were working that day, Rich. We're working again today, so that shows our commitment to the cause. And I think Ty might have been as well, or he might have been on the holiday. But it was a long day, a tiring day, but a fulfilling one. And it's always good to be at Wembley, irrespective of what the occasion is.
Yeah, Ty, I suppose that is the sort of overriding message, isn't it? That, yeah, it's not the trophy United were maybe aiming for. It's not the ultimate prize, but it's a day out to Wembley. United winning a trophy. What more can you ask for, really?
Yeah, that's it. It's a prize nonetheless. It's a trophy nonetheless. And, you know, there is sort of a trait here of brilliant Premier League managers winning the League Cup or reaching the final and doing something in the League Cup and it leading to greater things. I think, you know, Mourinho won it in his first season with Chelsea. I think Guardiola won it in his first season with City. Both of them were pretty successful at those clubs. I think Klopp reached the final and lost in his first season at Liverpool. So, you know, it is a stepping stone, but it's still a trophy worth celebrating. You look at the reaction of people like Casemiro and Varane, who have won the lot yesterday, and it's, you know, it didn't look to them like it was some kind of B-rate competition and B-rate medal that's going to go straight in a draw when they get them.
And Samuel as well, first trophy for Erik Ten Hag at United. I mean, should we just talk about the match itself, really? I mean, United handled the occasion, I suppose, better than Newcastle. They got over the line, they did enough, and they were worthy winners in the end. They
were. You could tell they were the more experienced team out there, and they had more seasoned winners as well. I think it was quite fitting that Casemiro got what was the winning goal, and Varane was terrific behind him. It was interesting afterwards that Ten Hag, he was asked about Martinez and Varane as a partnership, but he stressed the importance of having Casemiro in there and also Antony in there. These four players who have really changed the identity of the team. This rebranding of United as quite a Latino side as well. How they celebrate goal kicks, how they celebrate tackles. Those players have been at the core of it, and they are all winners. Antony and Martinez won things with Ten Hag in the Netherlands with Ajax, and although it's only the Eredivisie, they did have winning habits. They are accustomed to winning, and perhaps we underestimated them having that skill, them being that familiar with winning when they came to United, because there were reservations with those players. But Martinez has been one of the signings of the season. And as for the game itself, United didn't actually play particularly well at all. They just killed Newcastle in a 6-minute spell. In some ways, it showed the game showcased United's shortcomings in that goals are hard to come by. One goal was from a set piece. The other one was an own goal. I don't know how the EFL have credited it to Rashford. I mean, the replay shows as clear as day. The ball is going nowhere near towards goal. Sometimes if it's, you know, going in the vicinity of it, you'd think, okay, just give it to him. But it was a clear own goal. It's almost like they're playing a popularity contest there and trying to give it to Rashford. But although the goals are still hard to come by for United, it's not hard for them to win games anymore. They are very, very good at that this season, and the way they've managed this February has been terrific. I think there've been 3 draws maybe. Leeds was a draw, Barcelona away was a draw. I might be forgetting another one because there've been so many games, but to have ended this February unbeaten, having beaten Barcelona, won the cup final, 3rd in the Premier League, that is some going. And it's got to the point now where if they enter the March internationals in the semi-finals of the FA Cup, in the quarter-finals of the Europa League, and in the top 3 of the Premier League, nobody would be surprised. The belief is coursing around the club at the moment, and that's a testament to the terrific job Ten Hag has done. And I thought during the second half yesterday, United didn't play well. I thought the players were managing the game quite poorly as well, in particular Fernandes. Ten Hag intervenes by putting on a couple of fresh midfielders. Sabitzer got them higher up the pitch, and all of a sudden United were getting on the ball a lot more. And if the team is getting on the ball at that stage of the game in a final, then it's, slowly but surely the opponent's chances of winning is going to subside even further. So Newcastle played pretty well, I thought, up until the first goal that went in, but they were just so completely deflated by that. And although this was probably the most eagerly anticipated League Cup final, certainly in my lifetime, just for the presence of Newcastle, their trophy drought, United's own trophy drought as well, I never sensed that this was going to be a game for the purists. It was never going to be reminiscent of the days of Keegan and Ferguson or Sir Bobby Robson, Sir Alex Ferguson. There were a lot of goal fests when their teams came together. But I suppose what was unexpected was the manner of United's win. You didn't expect, in looking at it effectively, that they had that final boxed off before half-time, because Newcastle they were really just limited to sterile domination in the second half. And Eddie Howe probably this morning is looking at it, and he'll probably regret playing Callum Wilson. If you're Martinez and Varane, you'd rather play against Callum Wilson than Alexander Isak. I thought that was a mistake by Howe. And as creditably as Karius did with a couple of saves, the second goal, Nick Pope probably saves it, and that was particularly deflating for Newcastle.
Ty, it's often been, a concern of United that they don't have lots of winners in the squad. Yes, they've got a couple of serial winners, but a lot of the teams hadn't won trophies. That has obviously now been ticked, and lots of the players have said that they want to use this as a springboard going forward, really. How big do you think it is for United that they have finally won this trophy? There could be no more. You can't keep bringing out the trophy drought line. We can't keep on saying that United haven't won for so long. They have done it now, and they've got this winning mentality.
Yeah, absolutely, and it can become a habit. I remember Ole Gunnar Solskjaer used to say it all the time, and his United made a habit of reaching semi-finals and that one final, and he used to always say, if this team wins together once, then they'll win together a lot, because the feeling becomes addictive. The getting the medal, and particularly just the being on the pitch, celebrating with your teammates, like the scenes we saw at full time. You do it once as a group, and you want it more and more and more, and you do see that quite often. And I think that made sense from Solskjaer. His problem was that his team could never get over the line. United have done it now, and you do think it could be the start of something. And I interviewed Varane with a few other Sunday newspaper reporters for the day of the final, and asked him about that idea really, and asked him about his first trophy at Real Madrid. And he said Real hadn't won anything for 6 years. I think it was about 4 years they'd gone without winning the league, which is the equivalent to a lifetime really for Real Madrid in La Liga. And he said that one trophy just changed everything. It did become a habit. It did become an addiction, and you can see the same sort of thing happening at United. I think it is getting over the line is huge, partly for the experience of having done it. Like you say, there's people like Dalot off the top of my head, who's finally won a United trophy. Harry Maguire, I guess. Luke Shaw playing in a winning team in a final at last. So there are players there as well. Fernandes, who are winning things for the first time with United, and winning, beyond sort of, I'm not going to be disparaging and say minor leagues, but for Fernandes, it's winning the Portuguese league is one thing. This is having success in England with United is another level, even though he's won league titles. So yeah, I think it is a step in the right direction, and not just for the experience, but for that idea of it just becoming of wanting it more and more and more, basically. And that was kind of the theme of what a few players were saying post match on TV yesterday. Spoke to Vegos as well in the mix zone afterwards, and he sort of said the same thing, that once you've done it once, you want it again and again. And the great thing for United is like Samuel says, they've got the chance to do it again and again and again. It's been a 6-year trophy drought. I don't think anyone would be surprised if this drought lasts about 3 months, because I can only see Arsenal stopping them over 2 legs in the Europa League. I don't think any other team over 2 legs gets close to United particularly. And the FA Cup, I mean, you've just got to avoid City away in the quarterfinals, really, haven't you, to think you've got a decent chance of winning that or reaching the final as well. You get City at Old Trafford or City at Wembley, and it's a different game than going to the Etihad. So I think there's every chance that United win at least one more trophy this season.
Yeah, in the course of the Europa League, if you get Arsenal, they might be so focused on trying to win the title
That's
anyway
it,
that
yeah.
it's advantage United.
Yeah.
Samuel, I suppose the question is, what's different this time with United? Because other than David Moyes, there has been moments under 3 previous United managers where it's felt like something special might be happening. It feels like they might have turned a corner and they end up going around in circles. Van Gaal won the FA Cup, right at the end. Mourinho won trophies during his time. Solskjaer got to finals. He had big wins. What's different now for United?
Van Gaal did pop into my head yesterday when Ten Hag came in with the League Cup and placed it on the table in front of him, because that is what Van Gaal did when he won the FA Cup in 2016. Unfortunately for Louis, United had already decided by then to sack him, and he seemed to be literally the only person on the planet who was oblivious to the wheels being set in motion on that. Even his wife had twigged that his days were numbered at United. I think at the risk of giving quite a succinct history lesson, unfortunately with Van Gaal, that his team peaked in the first season. They had a very good spell in 2015, tailed off a bit, but they qualified for the Champions League. And I think his biggest mistake the next season was to revert to a more conservative formation. Ironically, the formation United playing at the moment, but it was the way United played, and people easily forget how stultifying the football was. And come the run in that season, the final months of that season, you had supporters vowing not to renew their season tickets if the manager was retained. Mourinho just was not backed in the summer when they had to back him. They finished second. They got to the FA Cup final, finished runners-up, a trophyless season, but undeniable progress. And then the tap was turned off, and as you would expect with Mourinho as manager, things spiralled. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he did exceed expectations by staying in the role as long as he did, and United did finish second in one season. A lot of mitigation behind that. United were very good at essentially playing training ground football without supporters there. But when it came to the biggest test that season, or the biggest tests, they went out of the Champions League at the group stage, and the Europa League final was a disaster class. And that season really did mask the reality with Solskjaer as manager. And unfortunately for United, the power brokers decided to give him a new contract, and with the playing field level the next season, they were exposed with the expectations raised, and Solskjaer was never going to deliver a title at United. I mean, it's remarkable. Some even thought it was possible. I think we all expected some sort of a challenge from them after the signings they made 18 months ago, but the manager was just not up to it. With Ten Hag, as I've said before, it's the best decision United have made in 10 years, easily. He's the best thing to have happened to them since Mourinho. If you're just going off, actually winning trophies and overseeing a style of football that the supporters can get behind, they can mix it up. United, there were times yesterday where they were opting for a bit of gamesmanship, trying to beat Newcastle at their own game. They didn't need to completely depend on it, but they weren't averse to it. The character in that squad is as important as the quality. I think we all wrote about that in the summer, how they needed good characters in that dressing room after having some bad apples in the dressing room last season. And to United supporters that you speak to, they look at this squad and they find them likeable. And those players who've been marginalised by Ten Hag, they're not leaking stories. It's become very difficult to get negative stories about United this season because they've been so positive. We're not proactively looking for nuggets of any mudslinging out there at all. Sometimes it just falls in your lap. But it's been few and far between this season because Ten Hag has got everyone in that dressing room behind him. And that's probably what none of the previous managers had entirely. Mourinho did to an extent, certainly after the first season. I think with Solskjaer, the players appreciated him and liked him, but they always felt he was a soft touch, and there were cliques in that dressing room in terms of it was it's been public knowledge what someone like Eric Bailly thought of favouritism about English players, which was complete guff. But he felt resentment. He wasn't the only one who felt he was mismanaged by Solskjaer. I mean, we've not even touched on Ralph Rangnick because he was an interim, but again, we've all written and spoken about how United players just weren't having his methods, and that spiralled pretty spectacularly as well, with some really chastening thumpings. With Ten Hag, he's a disciplinarian. The Ronaldo decision was key. I mean, Ronaldo did United a massive favour, and it was quite amusing seeing his friend. He was supposed to interview him, but he didn't. He pretty much just gave him an ego massage back in November. But his friend was deriding United celebrations yesterday. And the irony, of course, is that if Ronaldo hadn't had his therapeutic interview that week when United played Villa in the third round of the League Cup, he'd have been eligible for a medal. But unfortunately for him, he's not eligible for a medal. So he's got the Saudi Pro League, I suppose. There's always that to win this season.
Thank you very much. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. Tyrone, and we spoke about United's performance overall at Wembley, deserved winners. Who stood out for you in the Wembley showcase?
Casemiro and both the centre-halves were good. Martinez, I thought, was very good second half. But it was one of those, it was one of those performances where there was no, Casemiro was man of the match. But that wasn't his best performance in a United shirt. He was good, but he wasn't exceptional, I don't think. I don't think there was a 9 out of 10 in there. I'm not even sure there was really an 8 out of 10, maybe Casemiro. But it was, it was... When you win it, a final is always memorable, but as a game of football, it wasn't memorable at all. I thought it was a pretty poor quality game of football, really. United played well for 6 minutes and got the job done, and then sat back. And Newcastle are not a come from behind team, and they're also running out of steam fairly quickly. I think they've scored 3 in the last 7 in the Premier League. They've only scored 2 goals in a game once in this calendar year. I think they've played 10 now. So I think at 2-0, United knew it was job done. So it was just a professional performance. So I think Casemiro was rightly the man of the match. When you're a defensive midfielder and you score a goal and keep a clean sheet, it probably puts you in that conversation at the very least. And the centre halves were good in the second half. Other than that, I don't think there was anyone who played above their level, shall we say. It was just a comfortable performance, and it was a fairly professional performance. When you think about it, Samuel mentioned the context of the whole of February there. When you think about this week, and they were always on the back foot to a degree against Newcastle, because Newcastle have had an entire week to prepare for their biggest game in 24 years, basically. United were focused against playing one of the biggest teams in Europe on Thursday night. They've had a day to prepare for Newcastle, basically. You think United have beaten Barcelona and won a cup final in the space of 4 days, and in 4 halves of football, they've played above average for maybe one of them in the second half on Thursday. First half against Barcelona, they were relatively poor, I guess. The 2 halves here, they were no better than okay, even though they won the game. But that is a great trait to have in terms of managing your moments of when to peak. To beat Barcelona and win a cup final without being at your best and sort of managing your way through those games it's basically what great teams do, isn't it? Because they if they'd have played full throttle 90 minutes brilliantly against Barcelona, then maybe they couldn't have done what they did yesterday. So I think they deserve credit for the way they've managed this week and achieved this week. And even going back to last week, the same against Leicester, really. They were I mean, I was on holiday at the time, but they were pretty average first half against Leicester, weren't they?
They're dreadful, yeah.
Turned it round in the second half, and it speaks to Ten Hag's in-game management again, which I think we've all waxed lyrical about now. His ability to see a game and change a game is phenomenal. But they've had another brilliant week when you take the Leicester game. They've had two above average halves out of 6, and they've won all 3 of those games. And I think that says a lot about the mentality in that squad at the moment, that they are just finding ways, like someone said before, they're finding ways to win and get the job done, even on days in cup finals and against teams of the quality of Barcelona.
Yeah, of course. And as we always seem to say, it's consequentialism. If you win, then that's justified the approach for the game, and that's all that matters on Cup Final Day. It doesn't matter how you get over the line, as long as you do. So, yeah, a memorable day out for United fans. Samuel, special guest at Wembley. Obviously, Anton Deck sat well apart and despondent by full time. So Alex Ferguson was there as well. And so too was Avram Glazer. And United took the opportunity, particularly as the full-time whistle loomed, to air their annoyances, their feelings towards the Glazer family amid the takeover talk. How important do you think it was that United fans still voiced their message and their concerns on such a big stage?
It's obviously it's their prerogative, and they feel very, very cross, to put it mildly, about the Glazer family, and have done since the takeover in May 2005. There's no getting away from it. They've been very, by and large, quite consistent with the protests. There've been certain years where there haven't been really any protests. There's been the odd chanting games, but it's probably coming up to nearly 12 months now that there's been a concerted campaign to get the Glazer family out of United and to end their occupation of them. But it was inevitable. It was going to happen yesterday. You half wonder if the red, white, and black scarves, like I'm sure some supporters were thinking, well, is that to try and colour over any green and gold on display? There was nowhere near as much green and gold as there was for the 2010 League Cup final against Aston Villa, when that green and gold protest was at its height. That started in January of that year, and the momentum was sustained until the end of the season. And the end of the season was a bit of a killer for it, because it never really restarted and was as vibrant or as present as it was during those 4 months or so. So it was inevitable that Glazer would get booed if he was ever if they ever realised that he was there, which clearly they did. They didn't need a big screen to realise he was there. There were a couple of chants aimed at Avram Glazer. And then, of course, when it is full time, and the stadium obviously wants to give supporters a particularly intimate view of celebrations, there's Avram Glazer congratulating the players, congratulating Ten Hag. He was by the dressing room after the game as well. I think it was only the 6th United game he's attended in the last 4 years. I think that would be PSG away, Brighton at home, Chelsea at home, and it might have been Barcelona home and away, and yesterday. So he's clearly one who prefers bigger games to attend, which is always something that United fans like to take the mickey out of their own fans if they just rock up for big games. There was one lad I spoke to in Germany who encountered Anthony Croller, and he had been ribbing him about apparently only attending big United games, and this was Croller out in San Sebastian, so United against Real Sociedad. So allegiances run very, very deep, and you can get called a part-timer for not even venturing to Chisinau these days, I think, among some of the Anoraks. But there's really little to add on it. Fortunately for us, it was a week where there were 2 big games, and you could just focus on the football and shut out all that noise. There was a lot of build-up to both games, as there should be when Man United and Barcelona play each other, and as there should have been for the Newcastle final, given that Newcastle were going for their first domestic trophy in nearly 70 years, and nearly 6 years. That's a very long time in United's history. The last time they'd gone that long without winning a trophy was between 1977 and 1983. So you're going back 40 years. So there were interesting narratives at play to certainly make it quite an exciting build up for the final, and that was despite the fact that the week was punctuated by the Barcelona game. So it wasn't the build up wasn't as ramped up as much as it could have been, and we conducted our interviews with Lisandro Martinez and Marcus Rashford 3 weeks before the final. It was the day after the Crystal Palace game, so it was somewhat strange. You're talking to these players who are knackered after getting through quite an arduous shift, with which about a quarter of it was spent with 10 men, and they're having to look ahead to a final that's in 3 weeks' time, and they're going to have 2 games against Leeds, 2 games against Barcelona, another game against Leicester before then. But again, it's a credit to the United players and the staff and Ten Hag that they've not been remotely thrown by the takeover talk or the bids that have been submitted, at least the public bids that have been submitted. And Ten Hag as well, he handled the couple of questions that he received on Avram Glazer quite well yesterday. I think he just said he was really happy for the club and he wanted to be a part of it, I think was the quote he used. But he stressed that what he was saying was not in any way a reference to what Avram Glazer is thinking as regards to a possible takeover of United. So, I don't think it was a surprise that Glazer was present, because as I said, it was a cup final and he's got form for attending games against the elite.
Ty, I guess in terms of on the pitch then, what do you think the future holds for United and Ten Hag? How far can he take them? We've been here, I mean, like you said, the bingo card this week has just been whenever anyone says the word springboard. This can be, the stepping stone for future success, but it could also not be. What do United need to do next, and where do you think they are on their journey under Ten Hag?
I mean, it certainly feels like they're going in the right direction, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, you asked about false dawns before there, and I think there was questions to players on TV and in the mix zone afterwards about why is this different this time. And I mean, the reality is we don't know at the moment that it's any different. And at the time, those didn't feel like false dawns; they felt different as well. Looking back with hindsight, you can say that things weren't. Maybe there was. This does feel like it is something bigger than what we've had previously. Even the 2 trophies in Mourinho's first season. The issue with Mourinho was that he'd never been a long-term manager anywhere particularly. It always felt like that was sort of time dependent because that had always been his style. And this does feel clearly different, but that doesn't mean it's going to be different. They still have to go out and prove it. But I think it certainly feels like he's the most popular manager since Ferguson. When the players passed the cup down along the Royal Box yesterday and the pictures come up on the big screen and everyone gets a cheer, the loudest cheer from the fans by a long, long way was for Ten Hag. And as popular as some of those players are, it is the manager that the fans clearly love, and that feels reciprocal, given he was talking about how much he loves United in the press conference as well. But I think the fans can see that he is the manager. He's kind of restored power to the position of manager of Manchester United, and every single player who we interview now mentions discipline and things like that, and he's clearly got the authority back in that position. His reading of in-game management is absolutely brilliant, and I think all the fans will say this is going to be the start of something, that they can win something else this season and they can challenge for the title. I mean, arguably they're already challenging for the title. I think it's still going to be a leap this season to win it, but they're still in the conversation. They could go closer next year if they sign a striker and another midfielder, and it does feel like it is the start of something. But they have to prove it and kick on, because we have been in situations before where there have been significant spells where things feel like they're going better. Even under Solskjaer, I think there was a run under Solskjaer of 1 defeat in was it 28 league games, 29 league games, something like that across 2 seasons, and that's an incredible run of form. And granted, a lot of it was behind closed doors, and again in hindsight that clearly suited United. But at the time there were people who thought he was onto something there, and they'd struck lucky by appointing Mould as manager, when in reality they hadn't. And purely because this is Ten Hag, it does it does feel different. But it was refreshing actually. I was on one of the early trains down from Wigan yesterday, and I think we all remember 12 months ago now. I think we all certainly I remember, I think Samuel said the same, that we were leaning towards Pochettino at the time, and the online consensus was always behind Ten Hag, when a lot of those people who wanted Ten Hag would have never seen Ajax play a domestic game under him. He was just the fashionable manager, and it was refreshing to hear
looks like
a big group of matchgoers on the train talking about, looks like Pep. Ajax seem to be doing pretty well.
This young manager,
no idea what formation he plays.
Where's Turtleneck?
Yeah. That's
good
it.
vibes.
Yeah, never seen him play, but he ticks every box. And there was this group of matchgoers basically saying that they didn't know what to expect and weren't sure about him because they didn't know anything about him. And, you don't always get that sort of honesty. But I think for a lot of matchgoers, that was the reality, that they liked maybe the cut of his jib. But in all honesty, they hadn't seen his team play. I don't think Dutch football is even on British telly. And if it is, why would you watch it? There's plenty of other games on. So, it was refreshing to hear them admit that they didn't know what to expect. And I think everyone's been surprised by him. The fans clearly love him now because he has got that power, that control. He has brought that team spirit back, but he also controls that dressing room. And I think it does feel like the start of something. It doesn't feel like this is a false dawn, but they still have to go out and prove that is the case.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Tyler. It was just a fresh start and something different because United had tried every type of manager really since Ferguson's gone. They'd gone for the chosen one. They'd gone from elite managers, people with the pedigree of winning. They'd gone for the wild cards in Solskjaer, the club legend, and they just didn't work. So Ten Hag was just different really, and it has played out that way. I suppose, Samuel, a tough question, but hopefully you can give your opinion on it. What do you think needs to be done next then for United to take this next step? I think the consensus has always been that we think they are sort of best of the rest. They're certainly, in the discussion of a team that if they get their stuff together and the other teams falter, they can take advantage of this title charge. But still feels like there's work to be done before United are sort of credible title challengers properly. What is the next step for you? Is it about just signing more players, or is it just sort of gradual improvement and tactical variations as well? Because as we've all said, they're still not quite dominating games and convincing at the moment.
No, and that's also a positive in that they've achieved what they have done while still not hitting their peak under Ten Hag. The blueprint really is the Tottenham performance earlier this season. The way they played that night, the dominance, just how intense they were, and they look against Barcelona in both games. They played front foot football. They were intense again. It's difficult to recall United going up against a properly elite team away from home and taking the game to them. They did that in Camp Nou. The performance in Camp Nou was better than at Old Trafford. And sometimes things work out that way. You win games that you don't play particularly well in, and the Newcastle final was an example of that. United didn't necessarily have to hit top gear in that game because Newcastle, were, as I said, they just seemed so demoralised by how quickly those two goals went in that they seemed a bit unsure as to how to proceed, and they're also not a very prolific team when it comes to putting the ball in the back of the net. So that was always going to be an issue. I think for the final to have been a properly absorbing contest, Newcastle probably had to score first. So it would have been pretty fascinating to see how it would have panned out had St Maximin taken that chance when De Gea did well to deny him. But as far as United are concerned, I think they've only got 2 more league games before the March internationals, unless they go out of the FA Cup to West Ham, and that Brighton game would still have to be played, provided that Brighton don't go through in the FA Cup. And I think looking at their draw, are they away at Stoke or something like that? You'd fancy Brighton to get through as well. So the likelihood is United will only have 2 more league games in the next 4 weeks, because you've got the March internationals, and then I think they're due at Newcastle on the 2nd or the 3rd of April. So they're not going to be second going into the March internationals. But Ten Hag has said about if they're in a similar situation they're in now in April, then it's fair to say they've got a chance. I've always been quite consistent on it. I think they're a couple of players short. I still don't see them as title challengers. I don't think they're in the conversation yet. I think they need a couple more statement wins and to be possibly second as well to really be considered as credible challengers. It's not beyond them, but with the fixture congestion and with the commitments in the other cup competitions, you sense that they will come a cropper in the league. It's probably the wrong turn of phrase, because if they finish third this season in the Premier League, that's an undeniably successful league season. But it's just they're in a strange situation now, because I don't think anybody really anticipated United would be third coming into spring. with Chelsea so far behind, Liverpool quite a way behind. There's a nice cushion between third and fifth now. So this season is all but certain to be regarded as an undeniable success, that they've won a trophy and they are almost certain to be in the Champions League next season, and there's the possibility of more silverware as well. So strangely, there could be there's a slight risk of feeling disappointed at the end of the season, but the bigger picture is this should be a very successful season for United, and they will need to be decisive in the summer in getting in a goal scorer and a midfielder at the very minimum. Other positions are dependent on who goes out. If Maguire is sold and United have got him down to as a player who will be up for sale, they will probably need a centre back as cover. Donny van der Beek is never going to hack it at United, but does his injury compromise what they can do with him in the summer? Probably does. And would Ten Hag just say, well, let's keep him as a body because it's good for the squad. It's in the squad's interest. So I think the interesting thing in the summer is that there should be, and there needs to be, more outgoings than incomings this time. They had 5 permanent players come in the summer. I think how many signings have they made now under Ten Hag? It's 9. So it's actually one short of Ralph Rangnick's recommendation of 10 months ago, albeit not all of them have been permanent. But you can see why they've had to make those additions at the time, and the permanent ones, all of them have been good to varying degrees. So Ten Hag's hit rate is strong. As long as they've got the funds available, they've got to make I think at the very minimum 2 statement signings. Other areas of the squad, I think maybe a month or 2 ago we'd have still said they need a right back in the summer, but the way Aaron Wan-Bissaka has performed since the World Cup ended would indicate that's not necessarily a pressing area anymore, because he's another player that Ten Hag has clearly improved.
Right, thank you very much. We'll join us in part 3 when we look ahead to United's upcoming FA Cup tie against West Ham. See you in a minute. So Ty is back to cup action in midweek. Erik Ten Hag said this at full time. There wasn't going to be much allowance for celebrations. United have to focus on the task in hand. West Ham in the FA Cup. What do you think the mood will be like ahead of that one? Do you think it's going to be difficult for United to always pick themselves up and go into that game after 2 really sort of fully intense matches that were draining emotionally and physically?
Yeah, possibly. Someone, I can't remember who it was, but someone did say yesterday, a United fan did say to me that they feared that could be a tricky game on Wednesday and harder than it looks, and a potential banana skin. But at the same time, it's David Moyes, isn't it? It kind of does the job itself. I know they won there. I think they won them in the Cup. Was it last year or a year before?
They were good
League
in the Cup last
season, weren't they?
Yeah, League Cup it was last season, wasn't it? They were, to be fair, yeah. And they obviously had a big win at the weekend, didn't they? But you still feel that at Old Trafford, United are just going to have too much for them, really. Can make a couple of changes, I guess. Could bring Sabitzer in, could bring Sancho in, freshen things up. So yeah, there is the possibility it's a banana skin game for obvious reasons, coming down from that emotional high from 2 huge games in 4 days to a more run-of-the-mill cup fixture. But you still feel like United are going to be strong favourites, and things would have to go quite badly wrong for them to get knocked out, I think, against West Ham. Given the season West Ham are winning, even though they had that big result, it was only Nottingham Forest, and they haven't really shown the form or the consistency that they were showing last year when they won that League Cup game. And yeah, granted, they were very good at Old Trafford in the league earlier this season, but that was still fairly early on, and feels like United are a far better side now than they were back then.
Ty, I'll stick with you on this one then. I mean, you've already mentioned in the pod that, United could celebrate another trophy by the end of the campaign. Do you make United sort of second favourites then for the FA Cup now? I mean, of course, so many of the big hitters are already knocked out, and like you said, if they can avoid City away, then yeah, surely they can beat anyone on their day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be very surprised if they weren't second favourites. I think Tottenham are the only other big 6 side left. They've got Sheffield United away. Probably should win that game, but the thing with Tottenham is you just don't know at the moment. They're so inconsistent, and if they do get through that game, then I think you wouldn't want to draw Tottenham away in the quarterfinals either. That would be a difficult fixture. But yeah, I would make them.
Is Ty died on yours as well?
Yeah.
At the FA Cup for sure.
Oh, here he is. Yeah, Ty, sorry, there's some connectivity issues there, but I think basically what you're saying is United are back and they're going to win the FA Cup. That's what we'll sum up.
Yeah,
from,
basically. That was the gist of it. Yeah, I used a few more words than that, but that was the gist of it, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Samuel, stick with you. In terms of changes for the game, Ty mentioned there, Sabitzer could come in. I suppose McTominay could come in. There's possible changes at full-back as well. In defence, maybe? Put Maguire in, potentially Lindelof as well. How do you think United should approach the game, and are you expecting them to field a few changes?
They need to. They did look. Some of the players did look dead on their feet yesterday. Unsurprising after two real shifts put in there, and Fernandes was telling us the other week that he's not happy if he doesn't complete 90 minutes, but there have to be games where he is managed in quite a sensible way. But again, you look at the options there. It's a square peg in a round hole, and it's not really worked from the start with someone else playing as the number 10 from the start, other than Fernandes. They've tried it with Sancho. They've tried it with Weghorst, and Weghorst did okay in the first half yesterday, as long as he wasn't in the penalty area. You put him in the penalty area, he's pretty dreadful, which is a problem given that he's a striker. But there is merit to his play from deep. But I thought that was another thing that could have been potentially decisive at Wembley, and that was that United's bench was quite deep, and it was to an extent, as I said, with Sabitzer and McTominay coming on. I think that United were energised by those two, re-energised rather, and one of them you'd think has got to start against West Ham. It does help that there's a 4-day gap until the Liverpool game. It does make games tougher when you're playing Thursday, Sunday, because the day after a game, it's recovery. The day after that, it's one training session, and it's into another big game. And pretty much every game at this stage of the season is a big one. And it was two of the biggest of the season last week, and it's Liverpool on Sunday at the risk of looking beyond West Ham. But you look at the United squad, and they've got more than enough to see off West Ham, and Moyes has got this wretched record at Old Trafford, albeit it's mainly infamous for his league form there. As Ty said, he has actually won a game in the cup, which Ole Gunnar Solskjaer decided to rather dismissively toss off last season, which was quite peculiar given how things started to go awry not long after that. But as you said, I think with Maguire, there's an issue there, because you look at the manner in which he came on yesterday, and I know that United were only 2-0 up, so there's the element of bringing him on to shore things up, to ensure that they protect their lead. But he is essentially in the same position that Wayne Rooney was at the very end of his United career, when he's coming on in a game that he was never ever going to start in, just so that he can lift the trophy, which is what Rooney did against Ajax in Stockholm. The difference then was that Rooney was well over the hill, and remarkably, he was only 31. Watching him in his last few years at United, it didn't feel like that he was in his late 20s or early 30s. So there's not a great deal of age difference between him and Maguire, but Rooney was nearly 13 years into his United career. Maguire is not even at the 4-year mark yet, but he's already in that same situation now, where he has become almost a spare part, and it will take an awful lot from him and for things to go in his way over the next few months for him to be absolutely certain of being at United next season. You can't say with any certainty that he'll be lining up against West Ham this week. I would question the decision to change both centre-backs. I think taking Varane out would be logical, because he played both games last week. But Martinez is a non-negotiable, and the other defender that he's actually struck up a pretty good rapport with is Lindelof. When those two have played together, they've looked pretty good. So they can get away with certain changes and freshening up the side. Wan-Bissaka, I mean, it was a toss of a coin whether it was him or Dalot who's going to start against Newcastle. Wan-Bissaka was the better right back by far. So I think if they keep it to about 4 or 5 changes, they should still have a strong enough team to see off a team who, as Ty said, have well, until they battered Forest in the last 20 minutes, I think they were in the relegation zone.
I guess you're both gonna. I'd like your predictions, but it sounds like you're both still backing that to win a midweeker.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, 2-0.
2. There you go. Give us goal scorers as well, Ty, or
2 own goals.
Lovely. That's what football's all about, isn't it? The beautiful game. Thank you very much, Ty and Samuel, for joining us today on the Manchester is Red podcast.
Thank you, Rich.
No problem. Thank you, Rich.
And thank you very much wherever you are in the world. A reminder that we are now on YouTube. So if you search Manchester is Red on there, you can find the podcast and watch it as well as listening along. And of course, thank you very much for listening on whichever platform you're on. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review if you haven't already. Take care, and we'll see you again next time.